The story opens with a haunting, atmospheric introduction to the Caruso estate, described as a place that didn't just house art, it entombed it. The mansion was a gilded fortress where beauty came to die, where Renaissance masterpieces hung on walls built with blood money, their stolen origins buried beneath layers of legitimate provenance and inherited power. It established when Talia, while cleaning the portrait gallery, notices a barely visible authentication mark on the wall beside a Caravaggio. The exact symbol her father had obsessively documented in his research journals before his death. This immediately creates a devastating mystery. Why would the same marking that her father died investigating, the marking that supposedly proved he was an art thief, be present in the home of the very family that her mother warned her was responsible for his murder? The single act of pointing at that wall transforms Talia from invisible domestic worker into the most dangerous person in Matteo Caruso's world, because she sees what no one else was supposed to see, and she knows what that symbol means. Talia found her mother in the hospital garden, skeletal fingers worrying the edge of a blanket that had seen too many washings. Rebecca Johnson looked up when her daughter's shadow fell across the pathway, and something ancient and terrified flickered behind her eyes. You went back. Not a question. An accusation. Talia sank onto the bench, still wearing her maid's uniform beneath her coat. I had to. The bills. Damn the bills. Rebecca's hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping Talia's wrist. I told you to stay away from that house. From that family. Mom, it's just cleaning. I don't interact with. Your father said the same thing. Rebecca's voice cracked like old porcelain. It's just authentication work. Just documenting provenance. Just one more painting. She pulled Talia closer, her breath sour with medication. They killed him, baby. The Carusos killed your father. The garden seemed to tilt. Dad killed himself. The police report was bought and paid for. Rebecca fumbled in her robe pocket, producing a worn photograph. David Johnson stood beside an older man in front of a Botticelli, both smiling. The older man's face was unmistakable. Even Talia recognized Giuseppe Caruso from news archives. Your father wasn't stealing art. He was documenting their trafficking operation. Renaissance masterpieces reported destroyed, lost, stolen, all hanging in that mansion like trophies. Talia stared at the photograph, her father's familiar smile now looking like a death mask. Why didn't you tell me? Because I hoped you'd never need to know. Because I prayed you'd stay far away from that beautiful, poisonous house. Rebecca pressed the photograph into Talia's palm. Please, Talia. Whatever you saw there, whatever you think you know, let it go. Your father thought he could expose them and survive. He was wrong. I can't just. You can. Her mother's eyes filled with desperate tears. You're all I have left. Don't make me bury you too. But Talia was already thinking about the mark on the wall, about her father's journals hidden in her apartment, about all the questions that had haunted her for 5 years. Some truths, once glimpsed, become impossible to unsee. The mansion's security lights painted long shadows across the portrait gallery as Talia moved between the paintings, her phone's UV light revealing what the naked eye couldn't see. Authentication marks. Restoration stamps. Provenance codes that told stories of theft and forgery. She didn't hear him approach. One moment she was alone with the ghosts of Renaissance masters. The next, Matteo Caruso's reflection appeared in the glass protecting a Titian, his face carved from the same unforgiving marble as his estate. Most maids use dusters. His voice was quiet, which somehow made it more dangerous. You're using ultraviolet light. Talia's hand dropped to her side, phone still clutched like a weapon. I was just examining my family's collection with equipment that suggests you know exactly what you're looking for. He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne and something darker. Gun oil, perhaps, or simply the lingering aroma of inherited violence. The question is why? She could lie. Should lie. But something in his eyes, exhaustion maybe or recognition, made her reckless. Because my father died in this house 5 years ago, and everyone called him a thief. Matteo's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. David Johnson. You knew him. I knew of him. He took the phone from her unresisting fingers, examining the screen showing a painting's hidden authentication marks. This is dangerous knowledge, Miss Johnson. Is that a threat? It's a fact. He handed back the phone, and their fingers brushed, a shock of warmth in the cold gallery. But perhaps it's also an opportunity. I've been planning to properly inventory the collection. Seems my grandfather's record-keeping was selective. You clearly have the expertise. Talia's heart hammered against her ribs. Why would you want that? Because I'm not my grandfather. And because you deserve one honest answer about your father. His dark eyes held hers. Help me document what's really here. In return, I'll tell you one truth about the night David Johnson died. After that, you walk away. Deal. It was a devil's bargain, and they both knew it. But Talia was her father's daughter, cursed with the same fatal need to know. Deal. Giovanni's workshop smelled of linseed oil and centuries, tucked away in the mansion's east wing like a forgotten prayer. The old man worked with steady hands despite his age, restoring a Madonna whose blue robes had faded to ghost whispers of their former glory. He looked up when Talia entered, and his brush froze mid-stroke. Dio mio. You have your father's eyes. Talia's breath caught. You knew him. Knew him. Giovanni set down his brush with trembling fingers. David Johnson was the only honest man who ever walked through these doors, including me. He gestured to a worn leather chair. Sit, child. You deserve to know what your father died for. The story spilled out like confession. How David had been hired to authenticate several newly discovered Renaissance pieces. How his expert eye had recognized them as works reported destroyed in World War II. How instead of accepting the generous fee to look the other way, he'd started documenting everything. Taking photographs, collecting evidence, building a case. I helped him, Giovanni admitted, shame coloring his voice. I showed him the real inventory, the one Giuseppe Caruso kept hidden. Paintings stolen from Jewish families during the war. Masterpieces looted from museums. Works declared lost that generated insurance payments, while hanging in private vaults. His hands twisted together. Your father wanted to return them. To make it right. And they killed him for it. Giuseppe's brother, Lorenzo, Matteo's uncle, he found out. Your father was going to the FBI. Giovanni's eyes filled with ancient grief. They made it look like suicide. Staged it in the gallery, made it seem like guilt over his own supposed theft. I kept silent. God forgive me, I kept silent to save my own life. Talia's throat burned. Does Matteo know? Matteo was 17, away at university. By the time he came back, his grandfather and uncle had rewritten history. He inherited an empire built on lies. Giovanni met her eyes. But he's not them, Miss Johnson. I've watched him for years. He carries his family's sins like stones in his pockets. Perhaps you're the one who can finally help him set them down. Or perhaps I'm just the next person they'll bury to keep their secrets. Giovanni's silence was answer enough. The storm arrived like divine judgment, thunder shaking the mansion's foundations as rain lashed the windows in violent sheets. Talia had been cataloging a series of small Flemish portraits when the power failed, plunging the gallery into darkness broken only by emergency lighting that painted everything in shades of accusation. The roads are flooded. Matteo's voice came from the doorway, his tall frame backlit by the generator's pale glow. You're trapped here until morning. Something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely displeased. He produced a bottle of wine from the estate's cellar, a Brunello older than both of them, and 2 glasses that caught the lightning's flash like liquid rubies. They sat on the gallery floor, Renaissance masters watching from the walls as the storm raged. Tell me about your grandfather, Talia said, the wine loosening her caution. Matteo stared at his glass. Giuseppe Caruso was a visionary, they say. Built an empire from nothing. Commanded respect from senators and criminals alike. His jaw tightened. They don't mention the bodies buried in that foundation. The families destroyed. The beauty corrupted. But you inherited it anyway. I inherited a choice I never asked for. Refused the empire, and it falls to my uncle Lorenzo. He'd have turned it into something even darker. He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. Accept it, and I become the next link in a chain of men who chose power over conscience. So you chose power.
I chose survival.
And the faint hope that maybe I could steer this family towards something less monstrous. His laugh was bitter. Your father had that same hope. Thought he could save us from ourselves. Giovanni told me. About Lorenzo. About what really happened. Matteo's eyes closed. I suspected. I was away. And when I returned, the story was already set. Your father was the thief. My family were the victims. When he opened his eyes, they burned with something raw and honest. I am sorry, Talia. For my family's sins. For your loss. For this whole beautiful, terrible legacy. The space between them evaporated. Later, Talia wouldn't remember who moved first. Only that his mouth tasted like wine and confession. That his hands trembled against her face like a man touching something sacred he had no right to hold. The kiss was an apology, a question, and a promise that would destroy them both. The restoration workshop's false wall revealed itself almost by accident. Talia had been searching for her father's documentation, knowing Giovanni had hidden something, when her hand found the pressure point disguised as a decorative rosette. The panel swung inward with a whisper of expensive engineering. Behind it lay her father's last testament, boxes of photographs, authentication reports, detailed provenance documents spanning decades. But it was the floor plans that made Talia's hands shake. Architectural drawings showing a vault beneath the villa's oldest wing, a space that appeared on no official blueprints. The photographs documented what lay inside. Caravaggio's Nativity with St. Francis and St. Lawrence, stolen from Palermo in 1969. Raphael's portrait of a young man, lost since the Nazi looting of Poland. A Vermeer declared destroyed in the Dresden bombing. Dozens more, each a masterpiece the art world had mourned as lost forever. Each one worth millions. Together, worth more than some countries' GDP. Talia's father had documented everything. The smuggling routes, the forged provenances, the network of corrupt dealers and officials. But it was the final report that made bile rise in her throat. Written 3 days before his death, addressed to the FBI's art crime team, naming Lorenzo Caruso as the trafficking operations architect. He'd never gotten to send it. A sticky note in her father's handwriting clung to the file. Giuseppe knows. He's old, dying, wants to make it right before he meets his maker. Lorenzo found out. If anything happens to me, tell Talia I tried to do the right thing. The right thing had gotten him killed. Footsteps echoed in the workshop above. Talia quickly photographed everything with trembling hands, uploaded the files to a secure cloud, and closed the panel just as Giovanni appeared. You found it? Not a question. The old man looked simultaneously relieved and terrified. Your father trusted me to keep it safe, to give it to you if you ever came looking. Lorenzo killed him. Matteo's uncle murdered my father to protect this. Talia held up the photographs. And Matteo, did he know? No. Lorenzo made sure of that. Sent the boy away to university, handled everything before he returned. Giovanni's expression pleaded for understanding. But now you know. The question is what you'll do with that knowledge. Talia looked at the hidden panel, thinking about the man she'd kissed in the storm, the empire built on stolen beauty, and the father who died trying to make it right. I'm going to finish what my father started. Vincent Caruso found her in the hospital parking lot, his presence announced by the smell of expensive cigarettes and calculated menace. He leaned against her car with the casual confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Miss Johnson, we need to talk about your extracurricular activities. Talia's hand tightened on her keys. She'd met Vincent once before, Matteo's cousin, the family consigliere, a man whose tailored suits couldn't quite conceal the predator beneath. I don't know what you mean. Don't insult my intelligence. Giovanni's workshop. The false wall. Your father's research. He smiled, and it was like watching a shark mimic humanity. Did you really think we wouldn't notice? This house has eyes, sweetheart. If you're going to threaten me, just do it. I'm not going to threaten you. He dropped his cigarette, crushing it beneath Italian leather. I'm going to threaten your mother. Rebecca, room 304, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She's on the transplant list, isn't she? Funny how those lists work. People move up. People move down. Sometimes people just disappear from them entirely. Ice flooded Talia's veins. You bastard. I'm a pragmatist. The Caruso family has invested considerable resources in maintaining our reputation. Your father learned what happens to people who threaten that investment. I'd hate for the lesson to run in families. He straightened his tie. Here's how this works. You forget everything you found. You quit your position at the estate. And your mother gets the care she needs. We'll even expedite her transplant. Everyone wins. And if I refuse? Then I go to Matteo with evidence that you've been stealing from the collection. That you're your father's daughter in every sense. A thief who seduced her way into his confidence. He'll believe me. Family loyalty runs deep. Vincent's smile sharpened. Or worse, I let the family handle it the traditional way. Your mother becomes collateral damage in a very tragic burglary gone wrong. Your choice. He was already walking away when he delivered the final blow. Oh, and Matteo? He gets to choose to protect you and watch this empire burn. Along with everyone in it. Or do what Carusos have always done. Survive at any cost. I'll give him 24 hours to decide which matters more. His dangerous little obsession or his family's legacy. Talia stood in the parking lot long after Vincent's car disappeared. Her phone heavy in her pocket with all her father's evidence. Her heart breaking with the impossible weight of loving a man whose family would never let her live. The summons came in the form of a handwritten note on cream stationery that smelled of lavender and old power. Come to the rose garden at sunset. Alone. Estotsi. Sofia Caruso waited among flowers that had outlived her husband, her son, and countless family secrets. At 83, she still held herself like the queen of an empire built on blood and beauty. But her eyes, when they met Talia's, carried the weight of decades spent looking the other way. Sit, child. We have much to discuss and little time. Talia remained standing. If this is another threat. Vincent is my grandson, but he's also a fool who mistakes cruelty for strength. Sofia's fingers traced the edge of a rose petal. I called you here to tell you what really happened. What I should have confessed years ago. The story emerged like poison from a wound. How Giuseppe Caruso, in his final months, had been consumed by the need for redemption. How he'd contacted David Johnson not as a thief to authenticate stolen goods, but as an expert to help him document everything. To create a record that could be used to return the stolen art after his death. My husband was a monster in many ways, but dying has a way of clarifying one's priorities. He wanted to make amends. To return what he'd taken. Sofia's voice cracked. David believed him. They worked together for months. It was beautiful, really. Two men from different worlds trying to do one right thing. And Lorenzo found out. Lorenzo was always Giuseppe's dark mirror. All ambition, no conscience. When he discovered what they were planning, he saw it as a threat to everything the family had built. The night before David was to deliver the evidence to federal authorities, Lorenzo acted. Sofia finally met Talia's eyes. I knew what he'd done, and I said nothing. I let them stage it as suicide. I let them destroy your father's reputation. I protected my family at the cost of yours. Talia's hands trembled. Why are you telling me this now? Because Vincent has forced Matteo into an impossible choice, and I'm the only one who can end this without more bloodshed. She stood, producing a small leather journal from her pocket. This is Giuseppe's personal record. Names, dates, transaction details. Everything needed to dismantle the trafficking network and return what was stolen. I couldn't give it to your father. Perhaps I can give it to his daughter. This destroys your family. This family destroyed itself decades ago. We just kept decorating the corpse. Sofia pressed the journal into Talia's hands. My grandson Matteo is the first Caruso in 3 generations who's wanted to be something other than a criminal. Don't let Vincent take that from him. Use this. Finish what your father and my husband started. Save Matteo from the legacy that killed them both. What about you? Sofia smiled, sad and ancient. I'm dying, child. Cancer, like your mother. I'd prefer to meet my maker having finally told one complete truth. The vault lay beneath the villa's foundation like a buried secret, its entrance concealed behind a wine rack that swung aside to reveal a steel door bearing the Caruso crest. Matteo's hand trembled slightly as he entered the code, his grandfather's code, passed down like an inheritance of sin. "You don't have to do this," Talia whispered. The journal Sophia had given her was heavy in her bag, along with her father's documentation. Enough evidence to destroy everything. "Yes, I do." Matteo pulled the lever, and the door sighed open, releasing air that smelled of climate control and stolen centuries. "This ends tonight." The vault was a cathedral to theft. Masterpieces lined the walls in perfect preservation, each painting a story of loss, of families destroyed, of beauty weaponized. Talia's breath caught at the sheer scale of it. Her father's photographs hadn't done it justice. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Vincent's voice echoed from the entrance. He descended the stairs flanked by two men whose suits barely concealed their weapons. 3 generations of Caruso vision. Worth somewhere north of $500 million. And you were going to throw it away for a maid with daddy issues. Matteo stepped in front of Talia. "It's over, Vincent. Grandmother told me everything. About grandfather's plan. About Lorenzo murdering David Johnson. About the lies we've built our empire on. Sophia's a sentimental old woman afraid of hell. I'm not." Vincent nodded to his men, who spread out strategically. "Here's how this ends. Miss Johnson disappears.
Tragique accident.
You get to keep your throne, and we continue as we have. Or you refuse, and the family finds a more suitable leader. Your choice, cousin." "There's a third option." Talia stepped forward, phone raised. "The FBI has copies of everything. My father's documentation. Giuseppe's journal. Photographs of every piece in this vault. If anything happens to me, to Matteo, to my mother, it all goes public. The trafficking network collapses. Every dealer, every official, every link in the chain gets exposed." Vincent's smile froze. "You're bluffing." "My father died in this house. I stopped bluffing the moment I found his body in your family's photographs." Her voice was steel. "You killed him to protect this. I'm offering you one chance to let it go peacefully. Help us return the art. Testify against the network. Or we burn it all down and take you with it." The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Matteo moved, stepping beside Talia, his hand finding hers. "She's not alone in this, Vincent. I've already contacted the FBI. They're outside now, waiting for my signal. You can surrender, or you can make this harder. Either way, the trafficking ends tonight." Vincent's mask of control shattered. "You'd destroy your own family? I'd save what's left of it." Matteo's voice was quiet and absolute. "This isn't our family, Vincent. It's our family's sickness. And I'm done being infected by it." The vault that had held so many stolen treasures became, in that moment, a chamber of reckoning where the price of beauty was finally, terribly, tallied. The morning sun painted the Caruso estate in shades of redemption. Though the transformation had taken 2 years of careful dismantling, Talia stood in what had once been the portrait gallery, now redesigned as the main exhibition hall of the Johnson Caruso Foundation for Repatriated Art. The Caravaggio Nativity would be returning to Sicily next month. The Raphael had already gone home to Poland, celebrated with tears and champagne. Each masterpiece leaving felt like an exorcism, purging the house of its inherited ghosts. "They're here." Matteo appeared at her shoulder, his hand settling at the small of her back with familiar warmth. His tattoos, visible now that he no longer needed the armor of expensive suits, told a story of personal reclamation. The empire he'd inherited had been systematically dismantled, its legitimate businesses separated from the criminal enterprise, its stolen treasures returned to their rightful homes. Vincent was serving 20 years. Half the trafficking network had fallen with him. Sophia had lived just long enough to see the first painting returned, dying with something like peace in her eyes. The delegation from the Uffizi Gallery entered, their faces a mixture of professional courtesy and barely contained excitement. They'd come for a Botticelli that had been missing since 1943, a Madonna whose luminous face had watched David Johnson die and now would finally go home. Talia conducted the handover with her father's precision, her title now Director of Provenance Research rather than maid. Her mother watched from a wheelchair, alive, transplanted, given a second chance that felt like justice delayed but not denied. Your father would be proud, Rebecca whispered as the Botticelli was carefully crated for transport. Talia thought about the man in the photographs, smiling beside Giuseppe Caruso, believing that beauty could be saved. He started this. We just finished it. Later, after the delegation left, Matteo found her in the empty gallery. The walls bore labels now explaining what had hung there, where each piece had gone, the stories of recovery and return. It was a gallery of absences, but honest ones. Any regrets? He asked. Talia thought about the empire dismantled, the family legacy burned away, the impossible path from maid and boss to partners in restitution. Not one. You. He pulled her close, and his kiss tasted like freedom. I regret that it took your father's death to start this. But not a single moment since you pointed at that wall. Outside, the estate's grounds were being converted into public gardens. The vault beneath had become a conservation lab. The Caruso name, once synonymous with power and fear, was slowly being rewritten as something softer. A story of two people who chose to inherit responsibility rather than wealth, truth rather than legacy. The portrait gallery stood empty now, waiting for its next exhibition of recovered art. Pieces passing through on their way home. Temporary residents in a house that had learned to let beauty go. Some inheritances, Talia thought, were meant to be spent. Others were meant to be returned. And the best ones? The best ones were built from scratch, by people who refused to repeat their family's sins. She pointed at the wall where her father's photograph now hung. The only permanent resident of the gallery, and Matteo understood. This was their foundation. Not stolen beauty, but the memory of a man who died believing art could be saved, and the stubborn hope that maybe love could be too.